Hi everyone, I'm Gilly. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm one of the project organizers here at Amplify Montana Youth. And today we are here with Melissa Romano, who is running for superintendent. And I'll pass it over to Allie.
Hi, my name is Allie Caudle. My pronouns are she, her, and along with Gilly, I go to Hellgate High School, Missoula, and we run Amplify MT Youth. So, Melissa, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. So my name is Melissa Romano. I'm running to be Montana's next state superintendent of public instruction. First and foremost, I'm a mom. I have 4 teenagers in the house. I am also a Montanan. I am a product of Montana's public schools. I think it's fair to say I am not a career politician, but I am an experienced and an accomplished and a very proud public school teacher. I have taught in Helena for the past 16 years now. I am also the recipient of the 2012 Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching, and I am Montana's 2018 Teacher of the Year. And I'm running to be State Superintendent of Public Instruction to restore focused and competent leadership at the Office of Public Instruction. I think that Montanans need a leader who will show up every day and work to protect and promote high quality public education in our state. I believe we need a leader who is a strong advocate for all kids, from our 4-year-olds to our 21-year-olds, especially at the legislature and when it comes to funding our public schools. And I really believe that Montanans need and deserve a leader who truly understands the day-to-day challenges that our school communities face. And that's why I'm running.
Awesome, thank you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the superintendent does exactly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get it a lot, actually. Lots of times folks think that the superintendent has lots of say in what textbooks students are using, for example. But really, the state superintendent, the mission of the Office of Public Instruction is really that the office will provide vision, advocacy, support, and leadership to schools and communities to ensure that students meet today's challenges and tomorrow's opportunities. And that's really where I see my role, is in that when I talk about leadership and restoring competent and focused leadership to the office, it really is about providing a vision for schools, providing advocacy. You know, I just think that it's imperative that you have a leader at the office who will show up at the legislature and advocate for bills that would benefit Montana's public schools, and then, you know, stand up in opposition to bills that would be really detrimental to Montana's public schools. And so advocacy is a must. And again, it comes, you know, coming back to that supporting and providing leadership to schools.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of mentioned this, but why is this such an important race, and why should young people specifically care about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, this is a really important race. And I think young people should care about it because it's, you know, young people are our future. And so, you know, when I talk about providing leadership, especially at the legislature, when it comes to our schools, it's absolutely critical that we have a leader who shows up and advocates for a budget, right? In my opinion, it's not okay that a state superintendent would be absent when it comes to budgets for school districts. You, being young people, probably have seen or know of schools that have funding issues and funding challenges, and that's passed down to students through programs, right? When a district doesn't have enough money, things have to get cut, and then that is a direct correlation to what a school district is what they're being able to offer students. And so young people should absolutely care about this race, for the mere fact alone that we have to have an advocate at that office who is going to advocate for students, because ultimately students are who is affected. And if you don't have someone who's there advocating, it could be very detrimental to the kind of public school experience that you would have.
Perfect, thank you. So you mentioned that you were a teacher, but what specific experience do you have that you believe makes you qualified for this position?
Yeah, it is my experience as a teacher, I think, that makes me absolutely qualified for this position. I've seen firsthand what it's like when children come to school and they're not ready to learn as young little children. That's why I'm pushing so hard for public preschool. I have had that firsthand experience of children coming to school ready to learn, and then when they're not. It's my experience as an educator that makes me absolutely qualified for this position. Beyond my classroom experience, I've served on multiple state committees, national committees, continuing sort of that advocacy work that I've mentioned before, advocating for things that would make school better, whether that's having really defined standards. Back in 2011, when Montana was first looking at revising some of our standards and looking at whether Common Core would have a place in Montana. I was involved in those discussions because ultimately I was thinking about students and what would be best for Montana students. And so lots of different committee work. I served as a board member of the Montana Council for Teachers of Mathematics. I went on to become the president of that organization for a period of time, and have just always taken on lots of different leadership positions in a school district. And I think that, most important, it is my classroom experience that makes me qualified for this position, and my strong desire to advocate and lead.
Awesome, thank you. So this is obviously a big issue in Montana, but what is the role of the superintendent office in addressing the school to prison pipeline?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I'm going to try to answer it the best I can from my perspective. And it might not be what you're thinking. So from my perspective, I really believe that social emotional learning should have a really big part in our schools today. We know that mental health is important, and Montana has suffered with a high suicide rate. It's decreasing, but we still have a long way to go. And interestingly enough, Montana does not have K-12 social emotional learning standards. And I really believe that that is one way we can start looking at the school to prison pipeline. I firmly believe that social emotional learning really offers the possibility of acknowledging, addressing, and healing from ways that we've all been impacted by racism, by systemic oppression. It gives us ways to have self-awareness and teach about self-awareness, about self-management, social awareness, relationship skills. And I think all of those are really, really important when you're thinking about the school to prison pipeline. And so it seems kind of weird to think about that standards, like changing or implementing or having new standards could be a way to address the school to prison pipeline. But I absolutely believe that it does fall in social and emotional learning, and that can be a way that we can start addressing it.
Great, thank you. Let's see, should Montana schools take less aggressive disciplinary actions, like towards students?
That's a good question. I don't know that I can, say 100% like yes or no, because I don't know that I have a good pulse right now on what every school is doing. I know what my experience is, and so I can talk about my experience, but I think it would be naive for me to give a blanket statement right now and just say a yes or no, because I really can't speak to every school and what's going on in every school right now. I can tell you that in my experience, local districts are, we have incredible school trustees who are working every day to try to do their best, and local elections definitely matter. And I think that it's an issue that administrators, teachers, students are all concerned about. I spent the last 8 years in an elementary school. And so my experience would be that, we've tried really, really hard to meet kids where they're at and try to figure out an underlying cause for why a student would be behaving in a particular way. And it was always about, not belittling a child or, instilling these harsh punishments, but it was, how can we help this child where they're at and deliver the supports that are needed? And I do think that schools across the state are trying to look at it like that. But again, I can only speak from the school I was most recently in. So I'd be really curious to hear from you and both of your perspectives on that. It's interesting. I said that I had 4 teenagers in the house, so a 1 middle school student and then 3 high school students. And, even having them, like, I hear so little from them about, who's doing what at school or what the punishments are. And I think they're pretty clueless too. Like, they have no idea. They're just doing their own thing. And, I don't know that they even know. That's an interesting topic.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll kind of move on to the next question. But what is the role of the superintendent's office in ensuring that schools are providing adequate mental health services to students?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's, but basically, I believe that the superintendent should be helping to support local districts to provide the resources necessary so every single student can learn and be given the tools he or she needs to learn. And I do believe that includes mental health. Like I said, I'm really interested in taking a look at social emotional learning standards and figuring out, where does Montana fit in that conversation? And is this something that we should be taking a look at? Because we don't have a K-12 social emotional learning standards. And I do think mental health, it's one of my top 3 priorities. Especially, you think about just what's going on in our country right now. We've all just experienced, sorry about that. We've all just experienced a pandemic. We have protests happening. We have, thousands and thousands of people who witnessed a death on television. We've all experienced trauma at this point, students and teachers. And so providing mental health supports to students, but also providing mental health supports to teachers, I think is absolutely critical. And, from day one, I will be committed to having those conversations to make sure that every school district has the resources necessary that they need to address mental health.
Of course, thank you. So what are your thoughts on universal pre-K and early childhood education?
Yeah, it's absolutely a must. We need it. We absolutely need it. So mentioned I had 3 priorities. That's a priority of mine. Montana is still just one of a handful of states that does not offer a public preschool experience for students. I've had the firsthand experience of seeing what it's like when 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds come to school ready to learn, and then when they're not. And we know that all the research points to that when we intervene early and when we invest in kids when they're little and young, when they're 4 years old, it just has huge benefits in the long term. They're more likely to read on grade level. They're more likely to graduate from high school on time. And I just think it's way past time to not have public preschool. That is a fight I will be championing loud and proud, because it is time that we invest in our young kids in this state.
Awesome, thank you. Do you support Montana schools adopting a more comprehensive and inclusive sex education program?
That's a great question too. I think that's another hard one just to say yes or no, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say yes. And again, I'm speaking from experience with my own children, right? So I have questioned them on what their health experiences what their health class experience has been. And it's been pretty minimal. And I try, of course, they're my kids. And so there's times that they get uncomfortable if I start asking them pretty detailed questions. And so I try to give them their space and privacy as well. But there, I would say as a parent, sure, there are some things that I wish that that they learned more about in school. For me, like, I'm a pretty open book, so I just talk about it anyways with them and embarrass them. But I think, there are lots of families that isn't the case, and that's not going to happen. Kids are not going to get the information that they need, whether it's life-saving information or how to stay safe, or, where to go for help. They're not going to get that from home. And so I do think that schools have a place in that. And of course, it's hard, it's tricky. Like, not everybody agrees on that. But yeah, I would be, again, committed to the conversation at least.
All right, well, we'll move on to the next question. Do you believe that schools should update their curriculum to better teach about racism and LGBTQ plus issues in history?
Yeah, absolutely. Teachers have a key role in helping to eliminate racism, and I think curriculum comes as part of that. Obviously, I've talked about it before in this interview, but I think standards are a part of that, and how do we address that in our standards? Because ultimately, school districts are going to purchase curriculum that matches their standards, right? And so we need to make sure that they have really good standards, and that will help districts drive their decision on what curriculum they're purchasing. But definitely, yeah, I think it should absolutely be updated to address both of those issues.
Awesome.
And again, I'll throw in my other 2 cents. Again, that comes back to, really having a strong advocate at the legislature and about funding, because districts need funding in order to buy new curriculum that's updated so that we're offering, a high quality, world-class education to students.
Awesome. Thank you. So what is the role of the superintendent's office? We're kind of going back to providing resources to students again, but what is the role of the office you're running for in providing resources to students, such as computers, or if they're without broadband, stuff such as that, to students who may otherwise not have it?
That's a great question. I guess in terms of role, I'll say it goes back to providing leadership and advocacy. But I think really, the question you're asking, it comes down, that's more of a local control issue, where local districts are figuring out, what do we need? Do our students need computers? Do we need to provide them better access? And then from the state level, being able to look at the needs, and be able to sort of assess those needs to be able to figure out, again, like funding, what supports are needed, whether it's professional development, all of those things. And so, I think really it's a local decision. Like, local districts have to be thinking about, what are our students' needs? And then from a state level, it goes back sort of to that leadership and advocacy to figure out, how do we get the districts the supports, professional development, the resources that they need.
Of course, thank you. So this is kind of a more basic question, but what do you think graduates should know or know how to do by the time they graduate high school?
Man, that is not an easy question. Did you say that was an easy question? I'm going to say that's a hard question, because I feel like, it would be really simple for me to just say, well, of course they need to know grade level math and science and, English, writing, they need to be able to communicate. But I think it's actually a lot more complex than that. And I think that they need to know a whole slew of other skills. And, in education world, we often call those skills soft skills, which drives me crazy, because I don't really think they're soft skills at all. I think they're really, really important, and just as important as math and, your core content areas. But things like, collaborating with, how do you get along in a group? How do you collaborate? How do you communicate? How do you solve a problem? Problem solving skills. Where do you go when you don't know the answer? Who are your how do you navigate the world and solve complex challenges? And those are all things, that don't fit into a nice, compact science course or a math course, right? Like, you hope that by taking those content courses that students are developing those sorts of skills through content. But those things like communication are just so important. And how do you disagree with someone and still be able to be respectful? Those sorts of soft skills are, in my opinion, just as important as the content. So that's not an easy question, because those soft skills, they're hard to define, one, right? And they're hard, like, you can't assess them, right? Like, how do I really say, well, yeah, Gilly's great at communication. She's ready to go. She's, and Allie's not. Like, it's difficult to say and quantify those and say, yeah, but definitely, yeah, well-rounded students who, and I would say, like, a love of learning, like instilling a passion for learning and lifelong learning, I think is also important. No matter what it is, whether your passion is photography and art or biology or history, right? Like, whatever it is, like, I hope students also develop a love of learning and a passion to continue to learn.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think that's actually all the questions we have. We'll kind of give you a little while to kind of make a closing statement, I guess. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and do that.
Sure. Yeah, I can say, in closing, I can just say, one, thanks for inviting me again. I appreciate the chance just to visit and visit with young people, especially. I think that in this role, it's really important that young people's voices are also represented. As an educator, I've been frustrated at times as a teacher when policymakers are making decisions and policies and don't involve teachers. I think that a state superintendent who's helping to make decisions about young people and public school and education should absolutely be involving young people and high school students and even younger. So thanks for just inviting me and giving me an opportunity to hear from you and visit with you. I can tell you, as a superintendent, I'm going to wake up every day and work to ensure that every student in Montana, regardless of where they live or how much money their parents make, I'll be working to make sure they have the resources they need to learn. I'm going to fight to fund programs for our earliest learners, because I do believe that a quality public preschool experience is what's going to set our kids up for success in the future. We didn't talk about it at all, but something that folks don't often realize is that the state superintendent also sits on the state land board, and which is an important seat. I don't know about you, but I'm really thankful that Montana is full of public lands, because it's actually where I vacation and spend a lot of my free time with my own children. And so I do take that seat very seriously as well. And I'll be working to protect Montanans' rights to hunt, fish, and recreate on our public lands and waters, while also working to be responsible and maximize money for schools. And it didn't come up in our interview, but I can tell you that I will always fight against unfair discriminatory schemes like public funding for private and religious schools that drain taxpayer dollars away from the very kids who need it the most. And so those are some big things that I look forward to fighting for and working for. You can check out my website for more information, stay up to date with the campaign, spread the word. It's romanoformontana.com. But yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.